She thought she would marry a blind millionaire. But on wedding night, everything changed. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to today's story. The rain drummed softly against the tall windows of the Hale estate as Elena stood motionless in the marble foyer. Her fingers trembled around the letter she had received that morning, sealed with the silver crest of Hale Industries. It was an invitation, but not the kind anyone expected. The note had read, "One proposal, one contract, 6 months, confidential." She had not slept since. Her mother lay in a hospital bed, her medical bills stacked higher than Elena's courage. So when the car came to pick her up that evening, she stepped inside without asking a single question. Now she stood there, surrounded by shadows and wealth she could not comprehend. The chandeliers were dimmed, the air smelled faintly of cedar and expensive silence. Then, from the far end of the hall, footsteps echoed slow, even, confident. Adrian Hale appeared, guided by a cane of polished ebony. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit, his eyes hidden behind dark glasses. Though blind, his presence filled the room. "Elena Monroe," he said, his voice low and precise. "Thank you for coming." She nodded nervously. "Mr. Hale, your letter said this was about a job." "In a way, yes," he replied, "but not the kind you think." He gestured toward a leather folder resting on the table between them. "This is a marriage contract. I need a wife, not for love, but for business." Elena froze. "A marriage contract? I think there must be a mistake." "There is no mistake," he said calmly. "The board of Hale Industries will revoke my voting rights if I am not married by the end of the fiscal quarter. I do not need affection. I need reliability. You will live here for 6 months. You will attend functions at my side. You will be compensated $250,000 upon completion." Her breath caught. $250,000 enough to pay every hospital bill. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because," he said, tilting his head slightly, "you were the only one in the hospital who spoke to me as if I were still human." The memory hit her. A few weeks ago, she had bumped into him during her shift. He had been cold, distant, but she had offered to help him find his way. She had never imagined he remembered. "Think about it," Adrian said. "You have until midnight." Oh, but as the clock struck 11, Elena picked up the pen. Her voice trembled, but her hand did not. "I will do it," she said. And when she signed her name beside his, the lights flickered, as if the house itself was holding its breath. She thought she was marrying a blind man. But by morning, she would learn that blindness was never the real secret inside the Hale estate. The ink on the contract had barely dried when the sound of rain faded into a low hum against the windows. The clock on the mantel struck midnight. Elena placed the pen down and stared at the paper that now bound her future. Her name looked strange beside his, as if it belonged to someone braver. Adrian Hale rose slowly from his chair. Even without sight, he moved with precision. "You have made your choice," he said quietly. "Tomorrow the lawyers will handle the rest. Your life will change, Mrs. Hale." The title hit her harder than she expected. Mrs. Hale, a name that belonged to a stranger. A maid entered, discreet and silent. "Your room is ready, miss," she said softly. Elena corrected her almost by instinct. "It is Mrs. Hale now." The words felt heavy on her tongue. The maid led her up the wide staircase, her footsteps echoing off marble. Portraits lined the walls, faces of the Hale family staring down with the same cold grace as their heir. At the end of the hall, a door opened into a guest suite that looked more like a museum than a bedroom. Velvet curtains, a crystal lamp, a bed too large for one person. Elena stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance. Somewhere below, she could hear Adrian's cane tapping rhythmically as he made his way through the house. He did not need her tonight. Maybe he never truly would. Morning came with quiet discipline. The Hale estate awoke like a machine maid's preparing breakfast, a gardener trimming hedges, and the scent of coffee drifting through the air. Elena dressed carefully in the plain white blouse and beige skirt she had packed from her apartment. Everything she owned could fit inside one suitcase. When she entered the dining room, Adrian was already seated at the long oak table. A beam of light crossed his face, glinting off the dark glasses that hid his eyes. "Good morning," he said. His tone was formal, neither warm nor cold. "Good morning," she replied, standing awkwardly by the chair across from him. "You do not need to wait," he said. "Sit, eat." A maid served toast, eggs, and black coffee. The silence between them stretched. Adrian ate methodically, his movements practiced, precise. Elena found herself watching him, how his fingers traced the edge of the cup before lifting it, how he paused slightly before each bite. He was blind, yes, but not helpless. After a while, he spoke again. "There are rules you must understand. Our marriage will remain private for now. You will accompany me to public events only when required. The media cannot know this is a contract." "I understand," Elena said. He continued, his voice calm but firm. "You will have access to all areas of the house except my study and the east wing. Meals are at fixed times. You may not leave the estate without notifying the staff. These are conditions of confidentiality." Elena nodded, the words sinking like stones. This was not a marriage. It was a quiet captivity disguised as elegance. As she looked down at her plate, Adrian's voice softened slightly. "In return, you will have everything you need. Comfort, privacy, and time." "You said your mother is ill?" Elena blinked, surprised he remembered. "Yes, she is recovering from surgery. Then she will receive the best care. My assistant will arrange payment for her hospital bills." Her throat tightened. "Thank you," she whispered. He set down his fork. "Do not thank me. This is business, nothing more." The day unfolded in stillness. Elena wandered through the halls, tracing her fingers along the cool marble banisters. The house was beautiful but lifeless, as if light itself feared to linger. In the library, dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts. She found a piano tucked in one corner, covered by a white sheet. When she lifted the cover, her reflection shimmered faintly on the glossy surface. She pressed one key. The note rang pure and soft. Later, Mrs. Green, the head housekeeper, found her there. "Most women do not last long here," the older woman said, folding her hands. Elena looked up. "Why?" Mrs. Green hesitated. "Mr. Hale is a difficult man. Since the accident, he keeps everyone at a distance." The last companion left after 2 weeks. She said the silence was unbearable. Elena forced a small smile. "Maybe I am used to silence." That night, she heard faint music echoing through the halls, slow, haunting notes from the same piano. She followed the sound, barefoot, down the staircase. The melody stopped as she reached the doorway. Adrian sat at the piano bench, his fingers still resting on the keys. "You play beautifully," she said softly. He turned his head toward her voice. "It helps me think," he replied. "And you, Mrs. Hale?" "Should be asleep." "I could not," she admitted. "It feels strange, sleeping in a place that does not belong to me." "Then stop trying to belong," he said, his tone unreadable. "You only need to endure." She wanted to ask him what that meant, but he stood, his cane tapping once on the floor. "Tomorrow the lawyers will announce our marriage to the board. Be ready by 9. When he passed her, she caught a trace of cologne, clean, sharp, like rain on steel. For a man who lived in darkness, Adrian Hale carried an aura of control that made the entire house obey. As the night stretched on, Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere beyond the closed door, the piano played again, soft, lonely, and full of secrets. She had married a blind millionaire for survival. But as the music lingered in the air, she began to wonder if he was truly blind at all, or if he simply refused to see the world that had already betrayed him. The morning sun filtered through heavy curtains, turning the Hale estate into a world of muted gold and gray. Elena had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the piano. Every time she turned, she saw Adrian's expressionless face as he played it. By 7 o'clock, the household was already in motion. Voices echoed down the corridors, papers rustled, and polished shoes clicked against the marble floor. Mrs. Green appeared at her door with a calm efficiency that seemed almost military. "Mr. Hale requests your presence in the study, Mrs. Hale. Breakfast has been served there." "Oh?" Elena dressed quickly in a pale blue blouse and skirt. her hands trembling slightly as she buttoned the cuffs. The title, Mrs. Hale, still sounded foreign, like a costume she was wearing for a role she did not audition for. The study door was half open. Adrian sat behind a wide mahogany desk, the morning light drawing sharp angles across his face. His dark glasses hid his eyes, but his posture was upright and focused. Beside him stood a younger man with sleek hair and a practiced smile. "Elena," Adrian said, his voice calm and steady. "This is Nathan Reeves, my attorney and corporate liaison. He will finalize the announcement of our marriage to the board today." Nathan extended his hand. "It is an honor to meet you, Mrs. Hale. Your presence will make quite an impression." Elena shook his hand politely. "Thank you," she murmured. Adrian gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit. There are some details you should understand." As she sat down, Adrian continued. "The public version of our story is simple. We met through a charity foundation. We married quietly to avoid publicity. It will satisfy the board, and the press will not ask questions." She nodded, her pulse quickening. "And if they do, then you will smile," he said, "and say that love does not need witnesses." Nathan chuckled lightly. "That line alone will be quoted everywhere. It is perfect." Elena forced a small smile. Her chest tightened. Love, a word that had no place in the arrangement she had signed. Adrian turned toward Nathan. "That will be all for now. Inform the board and schedule the press release. I will handle the rest." When the attorney left, the room fell into silence. Adrian leaned back in his chair. "You look uneasy," he said. "It is strange," she admitted. "Pretending to be something we are not." "We are both pretending," he replied. "You pretend to be a wife. I pretend to be a man who needs one." "Oh?" His words cut sharper than she expected. "You think needing someone is weakness?" "I think trusting someone is," he answered quietly. "Trust costs more than sight." Elena wanted to argue, but the faint tremor in his voice stopped her. Beneath the measured tone, there was exhaustion, the kind that came from wounds that never fully healed. After breakfast, she walked through the gardens. The estate stretched endlessly rows of manicured hedges, white fountains shaped like angels, and roses trimmed into perfection. But there was no warmth. Even the wind felt rehearsed. Mrs. Green joined her on the path, carrying a tray of tea. "He used to spend hours out here," the older woman said softly. "Before the accident." Elena turned to her. "What happened exactly?" Mrs. Green hesitated. "A car crash, 2 years ago. Late at night, on the coastal highway. His younger brother was with him." "His brother?" "Yes. They said the brakes failed. Mr. Hale survived. The boy did not." Elena's breath caught. "He never mentioned that." "He will not," Mrs. Green said. "The guilt nearly blinded him before the darkness did." The tea trembled in Elena's hands. She imagined Adrian behind the wheel, headlights breaking through rain, the sound of twisting metal. No wonder he shut the world away. That evening, the formal announcement appeared across financial networks and social media. Adrian Hale, Chief Executive Officer of Hale Industries, weds Elena Monroe, private healthcare professional. A single photograph accompanied the headline, Adrian standing tall beside her, his hand resting lightly on hers. The comments flooded in almost instantly. "A marriage of convenience. He cannot even see her. Must be a publicity stunt. Who is she? A gold digger." Elena's phone buzzed nonstop, but she turned it off. At dinner, she found Adrian seated at the same long table. His calmness unnerved her. "The world knows," she said. "Yes," he replied, "and they will soon forget. But it bothers you." He tilted his head slightly. "What makes you think that?" "Because you only play the piano when you are hiding something," she said softly. He froze for a moment, then smiled faintly. "You are observant." Is that a bad thing?" "For most people in this house, yes." The silence that followed was not hostile, just heavy. Elena pushed her plate aside. "You do not have to protect me from the truth, Adrian." He lifted his chin slightly. "Do not confuse kindness with curiosity, Mrs. Hale. One of them saves people, the other destroys them." That night, the rain returned. It hit the windows harder than before, as if echoing her thoughts. Elena sat by the fireplace, holding the silver contract folder. Each clause was written with precision, each signature drawn in perfect strokes. But nowhere in those pages was there a rule about how to stop feeling. Upstairs, she heard the piano again. This time the melody was different, gentler, almost human. She closed her eyes and listened. The sound filled the empty house, weaving through every room, softening the cold marble halls. For the first time since stepping into this mansion of silence, Elena felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not love, not yet. But the fragile beginning of empathy. Adrian Hale might have lost his sight, but somewhere deep in that darkness, he still carried light, and she could not help but wonder how long he would keep it hidden. The following week passed in a rhythm that felt both precise and unreal. Every morning, Elena woke to the soft hum of the Hale estate footsteps in distant halls, the quiet clink of breakfast dishes, and the measured voice of Adrian giving instructions to his staff. Their marriage existed only on paper, yet the world beyond the iron gates believed in it completely. By the fourth day, news outlets had already begun calling them the silent couple of New York. The photographs from their brief appearance at the charity gala were everywhere. In each image, Adrian stood tall in his black suit, his dark glasses hiding his eyes. Elena, standing beside him, looked serene but distant. She had not expected the public fascination, nor the weight of pretending. That morning, she found him in the conservatory, where shafts of light filtered through glass panels and fell across his face. The scent of jasmine filled the air. He was standing near the window, his cane resting against a chair. "You found the only warm room in this house," she said quietly. He turned toward her voice. "I do not need warmth," he replied. "Just silence. You say that as if silence is a comfort. For me, it is," he said. "The world is louder when you cannot see it." She hesitated before stepping closer. "Nathan called earlier. The charity event is tonight. They said it is important for you to attend." He gave a brief nod. "Yes. The board expects us to make a public appearance as husband and wife. I trust you can handle that." "I will," she answered. But her hands betrayed her nerves, twisting the small silver ring he had placed on her finger at the courthouse. When evening came, a black car waited at the gates. The rain had stopped, but the city gleamed wet beneath the streetlights. Inside the car, the air was heavy with the scent of leather and faint cologne. Adrian sat beside her, silent, his posture composed. At the event, the ballroom glowed under chandeliers. Cameras flashed as soon as they entered. Reporters shouted questions, but Adrian kept walking, his hand lightly resting on her arm for guidance. She could feel the strength in his grip, controlled, steady, protective in a way that caught her off guard. "Smile," he murmured. "They are watching." She did. Together, they looked like the perfect couple. The illusion was flawless. Inside, music played softly as servers glided between tables. Business leaders and socialites approached with smiles that hid sharp curiosity. "It is so inspiring," one woman said. "Love that sees beyond sight." Elena forced a polite nod. "Thank you," she replied, though her chest tightened at the irony. As the evening continued, Adrian was called to the stage. He spoke calmly, thanking the foundation for its support of medical research for the visually impaired. His voice filled the room, measured, articulate, almost soothing. When he finished, the audience applauded. But it was the final words that made Elena's breath catch. "Blindness," Adrian said, "teaches you what eyes often forget, that we do not see people with vision, but with attention. And sometimes, the ones who truly see us are the ones we least expect." Applause echoed again, louder this time. Elena felt her throat tighten. His speech sounded sincere, not rehearsed. For a moment, she forgot it was all an act. Afterward, as they stepped away from the stage, a man approached them. He was tall, confident, with sharp eyes, and a handshake that lingered too long. "Adrian," he said warmly, "you always manage to impress. I am Vincent Hale." Elena froze. The name echoed faintly in her mind. Adrian's cousin. Vincent turned his attention to her. "And this must be the lovely wife I keep hearing about. You are even more charming than the tabloids suggest." "Oh, thank you," Elena said softly, unsure how to respond. Vincent's smile did not reach his eyes. "It must be quite a challenge. living in that big house with a man who cannot see. But I suppose comfort makes sacrifices easier. Before Elena could reply, Adrian spoke, his tone sharp and final. Enough, Vincent. Vincent laughed lightly. Just teasing, cousin. Congratulations again. When he walked away, Adrian's jaw tightened. His hand still rested on his cane, but his knuckles were white. Who is he really? Elena asked quietly as they returned to their table. Family, Adrian said, which makes him more dangerous than any stranger. The words stayed with her for the rest of the night. Later, when they returned home, Elena found him alone in the darkened piano room. His jacket was off, the tie loosened. The air smelled of rain again, faint and distant. You played your part well, he said without turning toward her. So did you, she replied. Except I think you almost meant what you said. He paused. And what is that? That people see us only when we least expect it. For a moment, he said nothing. Then his voice softened. Perhaps I did mean it. But meaning does not change truth. This is still a contract, Elena. She looked at him, his face caught in half light. Maybe, she said. But even contracts have fine print that no one reads. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held more pain than amusement. Be careful, Mrs. Hale. Curiosity can be expensive in this house. That night, as she returned to her room, Elena could not shake the image of Vincent's cold grin or Adrian's clenched hand. Somewhere between the applause and the silence, she realized that every person in that mansion was keeping a secret, and hers might be the only one that came from kindness. Outside, the rain began again, soft at first, then steady, washing the city clean while the Hale estate remained untouched, glowing faintly against the storm. The next few days unfolded like a quiet storm beneath the polished calm of the Hale estate. From the outside, everything looked perfect. The staff moved with practiced grace, the meals arrived on time, and the papers called Adrian Hale and his new wife the city's most elegant mystery. But inside the mansion, a thin layer of unease had begun to spread like dust over untouched furniture. Elena noticed it first in the way people spoke to her. The gardeners lowered their voices when she passed. The maids stopped conversations mid-sentence. Even Mrs. Green, who had once treated her gently, now seemed distant. Her eyes filled with something that looked like pity. One morning, as Elena made her way to the kitchen for coffee, she heard two servants whispering behind the door. She will not last, one said quietly. No one ever does. Hush, the other replied. If Mr. Hale hears you. The door creaked, and both women fell silent. Elena stepped inside, pretending not to notice their stares. She poured herself a cup of coffee and smiled politely. Good morning, she said. Neither answered. They lowered their heads and left the room. That silence followed her throughout the day. Later, when she entered the conservatory, she found Adrian standing near the piano again. His hand rested lightly on the instrument, but he was not playing. He seemed lost in thought, his expression unreadable. You are up early, she said gently. I could not sleep, he replied. The house feels louder lately. Maybe it is not the house, she said. Maybe it is the people. He turned toward her voice. What do you mean? Everyone seems afraid. They stop talking when I walk in, as if they know something I do not. He smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. Fear is the easiest currency in this house. My cousin has always been good at spending it. She studied him for a moment. Vincent again? Adrian did not answer immediately. Instead, he traced his fingers along the piano keys without pressing them. He has a way of reminding people where power lives, he said quietly, even when he is not in the room. And where does it live? She asked. In debt, in secrets, in silence, Adrian replied. And this family has all three. His tone was calm, but she sensed the exhaustion underneath. It was the voice of someone who had carried too many burdens for too long. That afternoon, she decided to call the hospital to check on her mother. The nurse told her that the bills had been paid in full by someone named Hale Foundation. She felt a surge of gratitude, followed quickly by confusion. Adrian had promised to take care of it, but he had never mentioned a foundation. When she thanked him later, he simply nodded. Consider it part of the arrangement, he said. I do not know how to repay you, she told him. You already have, he said. You kept your promise to stay. The way he said it made her chest tighten. For a moment, She wondered if he meant more than the contract. That evening, while Adrian attended a business call in his study, Elena wandered back to the east corridor. The locked door still stood at the end, the brass handle glinting faintly in the low light. She listened, half expecting to hear something, perhaps music or whispers, but there was nothing, only silence. When she turned to leave, Mrs. Green appeared from the shadows. Her face was pale. "Do not go near that door again," the older woman said firmly. "Why? What is inside?" Mrs. Green hesitated. "You think this house is haunted by secrets, Mrs. Hale. It is not the house, it is the people." Before Elena could respond, the housekeeper walked away, leaving her alone in the dim corridor. That night, the storm returned. Wind rattled the windows, and the sound of thunder rolled through the valley. Elena could not sleep. She sat up in bed, her heart heavy with questions. Suddenly, she heard footsteps outside her door, steady, deliberate, moving toward the east wing. She rose quickly and opened the door just a crack. A tall figure moved through the corridor. It was Adrian. He carried no cane this time. His steps were confident, unhesitating. He walked straight to the locked door and unlocked it with a key from his pocket. Elena froze. He was supposed to be blind. She waited until the door closed behind him, then crept closer. From inside came the faint sound of metal scraping and a quiet click, like a safe being opened. Then silence again. She returned to her room before he could emerge, her pulse racing. The next morning, Adrian was at breakfast as if nothing had happened. He wore his dark glasses, his cane beside him. "You did not sleep," he said. "Neither did you," she answered softly. He tilted his head. "What makes you think that?" She looked at him carefully. "Because sometimes even the blind can see too much." For a brief second, the air between them stilled. Then he smiled faintly, that guarded, knowing smile she had begun to dread. "Be careful, Mrs. Hale," he said. "In this house, seeing can be more dangerous than blindness." The conversation ended there, but Elena's thoughts did not. Every word, every sound from the night before replayed in her mind. She knew now that Adrian Hale was hiding more than grief or pride. Somewhere behind that locked door in the east wing was the truth, and she was no longer sure she wanted to find it. The morning after the storm broke clear and cold. The air outside the Hale estate smelled of wet earth and fading rain. But inside the mansion the silence felt heavier than ever. Elena sat alone in the breakfast room, the untouched cup of coffee cooling in front of her. Across the table, the chair that usually belonged to Adrian remained empty. He had left early again, Mrs. Green told her. A meeting in the city. No details, no destination, just absence. Elena's thoughts circled the same memory from the night before, the sound of his sure footsteps in the east corridor, the quiet click of the locked door, and the unmistakable fact that he had walked without a cane. Blind men did not move that way. Blind men did not need keys in the dark. By noon, she could no longer sit still. She went to the garden to clear her thoughts, where the last of the rain still clung to the leaves. Mrs. Green found her there, pruning roses with deliberate slowness. "Mrs. Hale," the older woman said quietly, "I would advise you not to look for answers that Mr. Hale does not offer." Elena looked up. "How long have you worked for him?" 20 years, Mrs. Green replied. "Long enough to know that curiosity in this house has consequences." Elena's voice softened. "He is not blind, is he?" The shears froze midair. For a heartbeat, the garden was still. Then Mrs. Green whispered, "Some wounds heal differently. Some people choose to stay in the dark even when they can see." She turned and walked away before Elena could ask more. That afternoon, a courier arrived with a thick envelope addressed to Adrian Hale. The seal bore the emblem of Hale Industries. The messenger handed it to Elena with a polite nod. "Mr. Vincent said it was urgent," he explained. She placed it on Adrian's desk, but the temptation burned in her chest. The envelope was slightly open, and through the gap she saw the words audit report and board review. She closed it quickly, ashamed of her impulse, yet more certain than ever that something inside the company was being hidden, something Vincent wanted to control. By evening, Adrian returned. His coat was damp from rain, and his expression unreadable. "You waited for me," he said when he saw her. "I thought we could have dinner together," she replied, "like normal people do." He smiled faintly. "We are far from normal, Mrs. Hale." Still, he joined her at the table. For the first few minutes, they ate in silence, until she gathered her courage. What happened in the East Wing last night? His fork paused mid-air. You should not ask that. I heard you walking, she said, her voice steady. Without your cane. He set the fork down slowly. You are observant again. Because you are lying, she said quietly. You are not blind, are you? The air between them thickened. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but his jaw tense. You think you have found something, he said. But you have found nothing you can use. I am not trying to use you, she said. I am trying to understand you. Then understand this, he replied. Whatever you think you saw last night, forget it. This house, this contract, all of it was never meant for questions. Elena rose from her chair, anger mixing with fear. I am not your enemy, Adrian. His voice dropped to a whisper. Everyone becomes an enemy here, sooner or later. She left the dining room, her heart pounding. Upstairs, the wind rattled the windows, and she caught her reflection in the glass, small, uncertain, out of place in a world built from other people's secrets. Hours later, she heard the piano again. This time, the melody was different, softer, almost like an apology. Against her better judgment, she went downstairs. Adrian sat at the piano, his back to her. The dark glasses were gone. His eyes were open. She froze at the doorway. He did not look blind. His gaze was fixed on the sheet music, his fingers moving gracefully over the keys. The illusion shattered completely. When the last note faded, he spoke without turning. You should not have come here. You can see, she said. Her voice trembled, but her conviction did not. You have been pretending all this time. He turned slowly, and for the first time she met his eyes, gray, clear, and painfully alive. I lost my sight after the accident, he said. But not forever. The doctors repaired what they could. I chose to let the world believe otherwise. Why? She demanded. Why lie to everyone? Because pity is easier to control than power, he said. When people think you are broken, they stop looking for your weaknesses. She shook her head. And what about me? Was I just part of your disguise? His expression softened. You were the only person who never treated me like I was helpless. That is why I chose you. Her heart twisted. You mean you hired me? He exhaled slowly. I saved you, Elena. You said yes because you needed help. I said yes because I needed a reason to believe in people again. Maybe that is the same thing. She took a step back. No, it is not. One of us made a choice. The other one was cornered. Oh. Neither spoke after that. The storm outside began again, wind howling through the trees. Adrian lowered his gaze, and the piano key beneath his hand pressed soundlessly. As Elena turned to leave, he said quietly, You wanted the truth, now you have it. But remember, truth can be heavier than lies. She did not look back. The house felt colder as she walked away, the sound of his unfinished melody trailing behind her like a heartbeat fading in the dark. That night, she understood something that frightened her more than his deception. Adrian Hale was not blind, but the loneliness he carried, the guilt that lived in his silence, was far darker than any blindness she could imagine. The next morning, the Hale estate was wrapped in a hush that felt heavier than usual. The rain had passed, but the air still carried its scent, wet stone and earth, a reminder that storms did not always end when the sky cleared. Elena stood by the tall window of her room, watching the early light struggle through clouds. Her thoughts circled endlessly around the night before. Adrian's eyes, clear and sharp, staring back at her without shame. The man she thought was blind had been watching her all along. Downstairs, she heard the faint murmur of voices. She followed the sound to the dining room, where Adrian was seated with Vincent. Both men turned as she entered. Vincent smiled first. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," he said smoothly. "You look well rested. I hope my cousin is not working you too hard." Elena ignored the tone. "Good morning," she said politely, then turned to Adrian. "May I speak with you alone?" Vincent's eyes glittered with amusement. "Secrets already? How charming." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Vincent, that will be all." When his cousin left, closing the door behind him, silence filled the room again. "You did not sleep," Adrian said quietly. "How could I?" she replied. "You have been lying to me since the day we met." He did not deny it. "You were never supposed to find out." Then why tell me the truth when I saw you? Because I owed you at least that much, he said. You are the only person in this house who looks at me without wanting something. She let out a bitter laugh. You think honesty is payment for betrayal? He stood, the sunlight tracing the sharp lines of his face. It was never betrayal, Elena. It was protection. The world I live in does not forgive weakness, and pretending to be blind was the only way to survive it. And what about me? She asked. Was I part of your survival too? He hesitated. You were part of the silence that kept me alive. The words cut deeper than she expected. You used me to make your loneliness less obvious. I gave you security, he said. And in return, you gave me peace. Peace built on lies, she whispered. Before he could respond, a knock interrupted them. Mrs. Green entered, holding a sealed folder. Mr. Hale, this arrived from the corporate office. It is marked confidential. Adrian took it but did not open it immediately. After Mrs. Green left, he handed it to Elena. Read it to me, he said. She frowned. You can read it yourself. I would rather hear it from you. She hesitated, then opened the folder. Inside was a printed report from Hale Industries. Her eyes scanned the first lines, and her pulse quickened. It says the board has initiated a formal investigation into company finances, she read aloud. They are requesting your presence next week, and there is mention of… She stopped. Of what? He asked. Of unauthorized transfers under Vincent's signature, she finished slowly. Adrian's expression hardened. So it begins. What does this mean? It means Vincent is moving faster than I thought, he said. He has been siphoning money from the company for months, but now he will try to make it look like I did it. The board already doubts me. A scandal would finish the job. Elena stared at him. You need to expose him. He shook his head. Not yet. If I accuse him without proof, I will lose everything. Then let me help you, she said. His gaze lifted toward her, calm but cautious. You already have. Just by being seen with me, you make me look stable. Stable? She repeated. You mean married? Yes, he said quietly. Appearance is everything to them. She closed the folder, frustration rising in her chest. So that is what I am to you, an appearance. He looked away. You are more than that, Elena, but this is the only way I know how to protect you. From what? She wanted to ask, but the answer was already there in his face, in the walls around them, in the unspoken fear that lingered in every room of the Hale estate. That evening, a small gathering was held in the grand hall. The board members of Hale Industries had arrived to meet Adrian's new wife. The chandelier lights reflected off the marble floors, and soft music drifted from a string quartet in the corner. Elena wore a silver dress that shimmered faintly with each step. Vincent greeted guests with practiced charm, his arm resting casually on a glass of champagne. When he saw Elena, he smiled. You play your role beautifully, he murmured as she passed. Some of us do not need to pretend, she replied coldly. Across the room, Adrian was surrounded by board members. His demeanor was controlled, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. When one man questioned his recent decisions, Adrian's voice remained steady. I may have lost my sight once, he said, but I have never lost my direction. The crowd applauded politely, yet as Elena watched Vincent whisper to one of the executives, she sensed the undercurrent of hostility flowing through the room. Hours later, when the guests had gone and the music had faded, Elena found Adrian in the study. He was sitting by the fire, the unopened folder from earlier lying beside him. You handled them well, she said. They do not trust me, he replied. They see a man who hides from the light. Then stop hiding, she said. Tell the truth. Let them see who you really are. He turned his face toward her, his eyes reflecting the flames. You think truth is light, Elena, but light only blinds people when they stare at it too long. She stepped closer. Then maybe they need to be blinded for once. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled softly, throwing shadows across the walls. Finally, Adrian said, If I fall, Vincent takes everything. The company, the foundation, the estate. Everyone who depends on me will suffer. That includes you. Elena met his gaze steadily. Then we find another way. Together. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if searching for something he had not allowed himself to see before. You are not afraid, he said quietly. Maybe I am, she answered, but fear is not a reason to stop. For the first time, He smiled without restraint, small, tired, but real. You should have been the one running this empire, he said. Maybe I still will, she replied, her voice soft but certain. Outside, the wind had died, and the city lights shimmered faintly in the distance. For the first time since she entered his world, Elena felt not like a stranger in his house, but an equal standing beside him in the darkness. And though she did not yet know it, that single promise to face it together would soon test both of them in ways neither could imagine. The morning after the gathering began with a strange stillness. The Hale estate, usually filled with quiet movement, seemed frozen in waiting. The staff spoke in hushed tones, as if the walls themselves were listening. Elena walked down the grand staircase, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. The smell of coffee drifted faintly from the dining room, but Adrian was not there. Mrs. Green met her halfway down the corridor, her expression tight. Mr. Hale is in the study, she said softly. He has been there since dawn. Elena thanked her and made her way toward the study. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Adrian sat at his desk, papers spread before him, the glow from the fireplace drawing shadows across his face. He looked like a man who had not slept. She stepped inside. You have been up all night. I could not sleep, he said, his tone low. The board is moving faster than I expected. Vincent wants control before the investigation concludes. Elena glanced at the documents on the desk. Is there anything I can do? He shook his head. You've done enough already. But I cannot protect this company if I do not know who is helping him. Her brows furrowed. You think someone inside the house is working with Vincent? I do not think, he replied. I know. Before she could ask more, the phone on his desk rang sharply. Adrian answered it, his voice calm. Yes, this is Adrian Hale. There was a pause, then his jaw tightened. What do you mean she did not show up? Another pause. Keep searching, discreetly. He hung up and leaned back in his chair. Who is missing? Elena asked. Margaret, the internal auditor. She was supposed to deliver the full financial report this morning. She never arrived at her office. Elena's stomach sank. Do you think Vincent? I think he knows she was getting too close to the truth, Adrian said quietly. The tension in the room thickened. The fire crackled, casting restless light across the papers. That afternoon, Adrian left for a closed meeting with his legal counsel. Elena stayed behind, restless, pacing the halls. Her thoughts turned again to Vincent's smirk at the gala, to the way he had whispered to the board members. He was not only greedy, he was dangerous. Needing air, she went to the gardens. The sky was pale and cold, the winter breeze sharp against her skin. As she turned a corner near the fountain, she stopped. Vincent was there, waiting, leaning casually against the stone railing. Mrs. Hale, he said smoothly. Enjoying your new kingdom? What do you want? She asked. He smiled, that same easy, practiced smile. To talk. I believe we share an interest in the same man. I doubt that. Do you? He asked, stepping closer. You seem intelligent enough to know that my cousin is not what he appears. Did he tell you why he hides behind those dark glasses? I know more than you think, she said evenly. Then you know he is not blind, Vincent replied. But did he tell you he is also not innocent? Elena held his gaze. If you have something to say, say it. Vincent's smile widened. 2 years ago, the night of the car crash, Adrian was behind the wheel. He was drunk. He killed my younger brother, and now he is hiding behind his noble act, pretending to grieve. That is who you married. The words hit her like cold water. For a moment she could not breathe. You are lying. Am I? Vincent asked. Ask him yourself. See if he can even say your name without guilt. You think you saved him, Mrs. Hale. But the truth is, you married a murderer. He brushed past her, leaving the words to hang in the air. When Adrian returned that evening, Elena was waiting in the study. The fire was out, and the light was dim. He removed his coat and glanced at her. You are pale, he said quietly. What happened? She hesitated. I spoke to Vincent. His body stilled. What did he tell you? He said the accident that blinded you also killed his brother, she said, her voice trembling. He said you were the one driving. For a moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the clock. Then Adrian spoke, his voice low. He told you part of the truth. Then tell me the rest, she said. He walked to the window, the city lights glinting faintly beyond the glass. It was raining that night. My brother and I were arguing. He wanted to take the car. I told him no. We fought, and I drove anyway. The brakes failed halfway down the hill. He died before the ambulance arrived. Elena's eyes filled with tears. So it was an accident? Yes, he said. But accidents still leave blood on your hands. She stepped closer. Why would Vincent lie about it? Because guilt makes me weak, Adrian said. And weakness makes me easy to destroy. He will use that story until it breaks me. Elena's voice softened. You cannot let him. He turned to her, his expression tired but resolute. I do not care what he does to me, but I will not let him ruin everything my brother built. She reached out, her hand brushing his sleeve. You do not have to fight this alone. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his eyes shifted. For a heartbeat, the armor cracked. Why are you still here, Elena? He asked quietly. You could walk away. Because walking away is what everyone else did, she said. And maybe it is time someone stayed. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire had burned out, but the air between them was alive, flickering with something fragile and human. Adrian finally whispered, Then stay. But understand what that means. I already do, she said. Outside, the wind began to rise again, sweeping through the trees. The storm that had been building for weeks was no longer just outside the Hale estate. It was inside it now, waiting for its moment to break. The next day dawned gray and heavy, with fog curling low across the grounds of the Hale estate. The city beyond the hills was barely visible through the mist. Inside the mansion, the air carried a weight that words could not name. Elena woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. When she opened her door, she saw Adrian standing by the window at the far end of the corridor. He had not changed his clothes from the night before. His tie was loosened, his shirt slightly wrinkled, and his expression unreadable. You did not sleep again, she said softly. He did not turn. Sleep is a luxury I cannot afford. She walked toward him. Then what are you planning to do? Adrian's voice was calm, but his words were heavy. I will go to the board meeting tomorrow. I will face them before Vincent twists the truth any further. And what happens then? I will tell them everything, he said. The accident. The truth about my brother. If I am going to lose what I built, I want to lose it honestly. Elena's heart tightened. You will not lose everything. He gave a faint smile. You still think honesty saves people. It does not, but sometimes it frees them. The day passed slowly. The staff avoided speaking unless necessary, sensing the storm beneath the calm. By afternoon, Mrs. Green came to Elena's room carrying a small envelope. This arrived for you, she said quietly. Elena opened it and found a simple note written in a familiar, elegant hand. Meet me in the East Wing tonight, midnight. Do not tell anyone. It was unsigned, but she knew who had sent it. At midnight, the house was silent. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked softly, counting each second like a warning. Elena made her way down the corridor, her footsteps light against the carpet. The East Wing was colder than the rest of the house, the air faintly metallic. When she reached the end of the hall, she saw the door, the one Adrian always kept locked, standing slightly open. She pushed it gently and stepped inside. The room was dim, lit only by the pale glow of a single desk lamp. Papers and photographs covered the walls. In the center stood Vincent, his back to her. I knew curiosity would bring you here, he said without turning. What is this place? She asked. He faced her then, his smile sharp. A record of every lie my cousin ever told. Financial statements, hidden accounts, transfers to charities that never existed. The great Adrian Hale philanthropist, visionary funding his redemption with other people's money. That is not true, she said, her voice trembling. You forged those. Did I? He asked. He lifted a photograph from the table and held it toward her. Look, the night of the accident. Recognize that car? That is my brother's body on the stretcher, and there Adrian, standing beside it, alive and untouched. Elena felt her breath catch. The image was grainy but real. The guilt on Adrian's face was unmistakable. Vincent stepped closer. He killed my brother and inherited the company that should have been mine. Everything you see here proves it, but the board will not believe me if you stand beside him tomorrow. What are you saying? I am saying Vincent said quietly. That if you want to survive this, you will not go to that meeting. You will disappear before dawn, and no one will ever hear from you again. Elena met his eyes. And if I refuse? He smiled. Then you will go down with him. Loba. For a long moment neither moved. Then she turned and walked out without another word. The hallway outside felt colder than before. Her hands shook as she closed her bedroom door behind her. She did not sleep that night. When morning came, Adrian was waiting for her in the library. He looked pale, but his posture was steady. You went to the East Wing, he said quietly. She froze. How did you? I heard the door, he said. And I heard him leave after you. Elena's voice broke slightly. He showed me everything, Adrian. The photos, the records. I do not know what to believe anymore. He stepped closer, his tone soft but firm. Believe what you see in me now, not what he shows you. Vincent is desperate. He needs me to fall before the truth about him comes out. She searched his face. Then why keep all of it locked away? Because those records are not just about me, he said. They are about my family. My father built this empire on debts and silence. I tried to clean it, but the stain never left. Elena's eyes filled with tears. You cannot fight this alone. I have been fighting alone for too long, he said. That ends today. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside is the evidence Vincent fears most, proof of his offshore accounts. I need you to take this to Nathan, my attorney, before the meeting starts. If anything happens to me, he will know what to do. She stared at the envelope, her hands trembling. What do you mean, if anything happens? Adrian's eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. Vincent will not let this end peacefully, but I will not hide anymore. Elena wanted to argue, to stop him. But the look in his eyes silenced her. It was not pride she saw there. It was resignation and courage. That evening, as the sun sank behind the city's skyline, Adrian left for the Hale Industries headquarters. Elena watched from the window as his car disappeared down the long driveway. The envelope in her hand felt like a heartbeat, heavy, fragile, and alive with danger. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall again, soft and steady, as if the sky itself knew that the night ahead would change everything. The morning of the board meeting arrived with a cold wind sweeping through the city. Clouds pressed low over the skyline, and the air smelled faintly of rain and steel. Inside the Hale estate, the house was silent, as if it too was holding its breath. Elena stood by the window, still in her robe, the sealed envelope heavy in her hands. Adrian had left before dawn, his last words still echoing in her mind. If anything happens, give this to Nathan. She had not slept since. Every hour that passed felt like a countdown. By 9 o'clock, she could not wait any longer. She dressed quickly, took a taxi into the city, and arrived at the Hale Industries Tower, just as the morning traffic began to blur into noise. The building loomed above her, tall and mirrored, reflecting the gray sky. The lobby was filled with people in dark suits, all moving with the kind of speed that came from fear disguised as ambition. Elena pressed the elevator button and rode to the top floor. Her reflection in the mirrored walls looked foreign, pale, determined, and far stronger than she felt. When the doors opened, she stepped into a corridor lined with glass offices. Nathan Reeves, Adrian's attorney, was already waiting near the conference room. He looked startled to see her. Mrs. Hale, you should not be here. I have something for you, she said, handing him the envelope. Adrian told me to give it to you if anything went wrong. Nathan took it carefully, his expression changing as he recognized the seal. Where is he? He went ahead of me, she said. Is he inside? Nathan nodded. The board has been in session for almost 30 minutes. Oh. Elena looked through the glass wall into the conference room. Adrian sat at the far end of a long table, his posture calm but rigid. Across from him sat Vincent, confident and poised, a faint smile playing at his lips. Around them, the board members whispered among themselves. A few minutes later, the door opened, and one of the assistants motioned for Nathan to enter. Elena waited just outside, close enough to hear the low hum of voices through the glass. Mr. Hale, one board member said, you stand accused of mismanaging company funds and falsifying financial records. Do you have anything to say before we vote? Adrian rose slowly. Yes, he said. I have been accused of many things in my life, some true, some not. But I have never stolen from my own company. The man who has been moving money under my name is my cousin, Vincent Hale. Murmurs rippled through the room. Vincent laughed softly. Proof, Adrian. You have none. Oh. Adrian glanced toward Nathan. The attorney opened the envelope and spread the contents across the table bank statements, offshore transfers, and Vincent's forged signatures. The board members leaned in, whispering, their surprise turning to disbelief. Vincent's smile faltered. This is a fabrication, he said sharply. Anyone could have— Enough, Adrian interrupted. You framed me for your crimes. You killed the auditor who discovered your accounts, and now you will answer for it. The room fell silent. For the first time, Vincent's composure cracked. You cannot prove that, he said. Adrian's voice was steady. The police can. I sent them everything this morning. Vincent's eyes darkened. You think this is over? He hissed. It is, Adrian said quietly. You just do not know it yet. In that moment, Vincent's mask dropped. He lunged forward, slamming his fist against the table. The board members jumped back. Nathan stepped between them, holding up a hand. That is enough, he said firmly. Security arrived moments later. Vincent tried to protest, but the evidence on the table spoke louder than any words. As the guards led him out, he turned to Adrian one last time. You think you won, he spat, but you will never wash the blood from your hands. The doors closed behind him, and silence filled the room. Adrian remained standing for a moment, then sat slowly, as if the weight of years had finally caught up to him. It is finished, he said softly. Nathan nodded. The company is safe, but you need rest. You should go home. Adrian looked through the glass wall and saw Elena standing there, her eyes full of quiet strength. He rose and walked out of the room toward her. You should not have come, he said gently. I could not stay away, she replied. I needed to know you were safe. He gave a faint, tired smile. You are the only reason I am. Oh. Outside, rain began to fall again, streaking the glass windows. The city below blurred into gray. On the drive back to the estate, neither spoke. The storm grew heavier, thunder rolling in the distance. When they arrived, the house was dark except for the faint light from the piano room. Adrian set his coat aside and walked to the instrument. He ran his fingers across the keys, pressing one softly. I used to think music could erase memory, he said quietly. But it never does. It only makes it bearable. Elena stood behind him. Then play, she said. Not to erase, but to begin again. He looked up at her, and for the first time in months, there was no distance in his eyes. Only exhaustion and something close to peace. He began to play a slow, uncertain melody that filled the empty house with sound. Elena listened, standing beside him. The storm outside softened, the thunder fading into rain. For the first time since she stepped into his world, the darkness around them did not feel like a prison. It felt like the closing of one chapter and the fragile beginning of another. And somewhere in that quiet, beneath the hum of the storm and the notes of the piano, she realized that this, whatever it was between them, had become real. The following morning carried a calm that felt almost unnatural. After days of tension, accusations, and storms, the Hale estate seemed to breathe again. The sky was pale blue, streaked with faint sunlight, and the air smelled clean from the night's rain. Yet inside the house, a quiet unease lingered, like a shadow that refused to fade. Elena woke early and found Adrian already in the conservatory. The morning light filtered through the glass roof, casting soft reflections across the floor. He was seated by the piano, though he was not playing. His hands rested on his knees, still and thoughtful. You should rest, she said as she approached. He looked up at her. I tried, he replied, but sleep does not come easily when the past refuses to stay buried. Elena sat beside him. You did what you had to do. Vincent will face justice now. Adrian gave a faint smile, though it did not reach his eyes. Justice, he said quietly. It is a beautiful word, but it never feels like enough. She studied him for a moment, then asked gently, what happens now? He turned his gaze toward the garden outside. Now I rebuild. The company is stable again, but I no longer trust the foundation it stands on. I plan to step back, at least for a while. You are walking away? I am walking toward something else, he said. Something that feels human again. His tone carried a weariness that broke her heart. The weight he carried had shaped him for so long that she was not sure he remembered what it felt like to breathe freely. Later that morning, a police car arrived at the estate. 2 detectives came to finalize Vincent's arrest documents. Elena stayed in the hall while they spoke with Adrian in the study. Through the closed door, she could hear fragments of the conversation, words like evidence, charges, and custody. When they left, Adrian stood by the window, silent. "Is it done?" she asked softly. "Yes," he said. "Vincent is in custody. The board voted to remove him permanently. His accounts have been frozen." "That means you are safe now," she said. Adrian turned toward her. "Safe is a strange word. My cousin is behind bars, but part of me is still there with him. The night of the accident, I thought I had lost everything, my brother, my sight, my purpose. I let guilt build this prison, and Vincent simply learned how to use it." Elena stepped closer. "Then tear it down. Start again." He looked at her, his expression softening. "You make it sound simple." "It is not simple," she said, "but it is possible." Oh, for a long moment, they stood in silence. The air between them was thick with words, neither dared to speak. That evening, the estate was quiet. The staff had retired early, and only the distant hum of the city filled the space. Elena walked through the halls, the sound of her footsteps echoing softly. She found herself in the gallery, a long room filled with family portraits, each painted face staring down from the past. She paused in front of one large painting near the center. It showed Adrian and his younger brother, taken years before. The resemblance was striking: the same gray eyes, the same quiet strength. But where Adrian's expression was now shaped by loss, his brother's smile was open and unguarded. Adrian entered the room behind her. "He was the better man," he said quietly. She turned. "You still blame yourself for his death?" He nodded. "Every day." "He would not want that," she said. "How do you know?" "Because I have seen how you live," she answered. "You carry his memory as punishment, not love. Maybe it is time to forgive both of you." He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "You are wiser than you look." "I am stubborn," she said, smiling faintly. "There is a difference." He laughed softly, the sound unfamiliar but genuine. "Then maybe I need more of that in my life." They walked together through the hall, past the portraits, and into the open foyer. The night air drifted through the open doors, cool and clean. For the first time since she had met him, Adrian's shoulders seemed lighter. Later, in the conservatory, he poured them both tea. The fragrance of jasmine filled the air. "I have been thinking," he said. "When I met you, everything I did was built on a contract. Every word between us was a transaction. But somewhere along the way, that stopped being true." Elena looked at him, her heart quiet but steady. "Then what is it now?" He set down his cup. "Something real. Something I do not want to lose." The honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. "You will not lose it," she said. "Not if you stop hiding from it." He reached out and gently took her hand. "You were supposed to be a symbol, someone to stand beside me so the world would think I was whole. But you became the reason I wanted to be whole again." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Then stop pretending you do not deserve happiness." "Oh." The clock in the hall chimed softly, marking the hour. Adrian squeezed her hand lightly. "Tomorrow, I will make it official. I will resign from the company. I want to start the Hale Foundation for real this time, not as a shield, but as a promise, for people who have lost something they cannot replace." She smiled through her tears. "That sounds like something your brother would be proud of." Adrian nodded slowly. "Maybe he will forgive me, wherever he is." Lou. As the night deepened, the storm that had followed them for weeks finally began to fade. The air outside was clear, and the moon cast a faint silver light through the glass roof. For the first time in years, Adrian Hale felt free, not from guilt, not from pain, but from the illusion that he had to carry both alone. And for the first time, Elena allowed herself to believe that love, born from something false, could still grow into something true. The following day broke, with pale sunlight stretching across the gardens of the Hale estate. The rain had washed everything clean, and for the first time in weeks, the air felt calm. But inside the mansion, that calm carried a fragile edge, as if one wrong word could shatter it completely. Elena stood in the library, watching Adrian pack away a set of documents into a leather case. He was dressed simply, without the usual precision that defined him: no tie, no suit jacket, just a white shirt rolled to his elbows. There was something almost human about that vulnerability. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. Adrian glanced up. "Yes, the board accepted my resignation this morning. By tonight, they will have a new interim chairman. What will you do now?" "I will rebuild the Hale Foundation," he said. "Not as a business strategy, but as something real. A place for rehabilitation and education for those who have lost their sight." Elena smiled faintly. "Then, you will give others what you lost." He nodded. "Maybe that is the only way to forgive myself." For a while, silence filled the room except for the ticking of the clock and the faint rustle of papers. Then Mrs. Green entered, holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. "This was delivered for you, Mr. Hale," she said. Adrian frowned. "Who sent it?" "There is no name," she replied. "It came by courier." He took the package carefully, his expression tightening as he untied the string. Inside was a single object, a small metal key, old and scratched, attached to a folded note. Elena leaned closer as he opened it. The handwriting was precise and familiar. "You can lock me away, but the truth has its own key. Check the East Wing. You never buried the past deep enough." Vincent's signature was at the bottom. Adrian's jaw clenched. He must have sent this before his arrest. Elena frowned. "What does he mean?" He stared at the key for a long moment. "I do not know, but the East Wing was sealed years before I moved back here. My father used it as a private study before his death. No one has been inside since." "Then maybe it is time you opened it," she said gently. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Adrian and Elena made their way down the east corridor. The air grew colder with each step, and the light from their lantern flickered along the walls. At the end of the hall stood the old door, heavy, locked, untouched for years. Adrian turned the key slowly. The lock clicked, the sound echoing down the hallway. The door creaked open, releasing a wave of stale air and dust. Inside, the room was lined with old furniture covered in white sheets. A faint smell of ink and leather lingered in the air. On the far side stood a massive desk, its surface buried under old ledgers and faded photographs. Elena brushed away a layer of dust from one of the ledgers. "These are company records," she said softly. "From before you took over." Adrian flipped through one of the books, his eyes scanning the pages. "These are from my father's tenure," he said. "But there are entries here that do not match the official files." "What kind of entries?" He pointed to a list of payments. "These accounts were hidden. Vincent must have discovered them when he tried to seize control. My father was funneling money into offshore holdings long before the company was legally structured." Elena's brow furrowed. "Does this mean your father was the one who started the corruption?" Adrian nodded slowly. "Yes. Vincent only continued what had already begun. The foundation of Hale Industries was never clean." Luff. He sank into the old chair behind the desk, the weight of the revelation pressing against him. "I spent years trying to restore a legacy that never deserved saving." Elena placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you start a new one. You build something that does deserve saving." He looked up at her, his expression softening. "You always make it sound so simple." "Because the truth is simple," she said. "It is just hard to live with." "No." As they searched through the rest of the room, they found a box sealed with wax. Inside were photographs, some of Adrian's father at company events, others of young Vincent and Adrian together. But near the bottom of the stack lay something different. A letter addressed to Adrian, dated years before his father's death. Adrian unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakable. "My son, if you are reading this, then I have failed. What I built was never meant to be pure. I told myself I was protecting our family, but greed makes cowards of men. Do not inherit my silence. Tell the truth, even if it costs you everything." Elena watched him, her heart aching at the look in his eyes. He folded the letter slowly, then whispered. He knew what would happen. He just did not know how to stop it. "You do," she said softly. He looked at her, a faint spark of resolve returning to his face. "Maybe I finally do." "Oh?" They left the East Wing together, closing the door behind them. The air in the corridor felt lighter somehow, as if a long-held secret had finally been released into the open. Later that night, Adrian placed the letter and ledgers into the fireplace in his study. The flames caught quickly, devouring the paper until only ashes remained. Elena stood beside him, watching the fire burn. When it was done, he turned to her. "The past no longer owns me," he said quietly. "Tomorrow, I begin again." Elena smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then, let tomorrow come." The firelight flickered across their faces, warm and alive. Outside, the last traces of dusk faded from the sky, and the Hale estate stood silent, not haunted anymore, but at peace, ready for whatever light the next morning would bring. The next morning arrived quiet and clear. The air around the Hale estate carried a new stillness, the kind that follows the end of a long storm. Sunlight slipped through the tall windows, touching the marble floors with a gentle warmth that had not been there before. For the first time, the house no longer felt like a prison. It felt alive again. Elena woke early and found herself drawn to the garden. The roses, heavy with dew, shimmered in the light. The scent of earth and jasmine filled the air. For weeks, the estate had been cloaked in tension and grief, but now there was room for something else, something that felt almost like hope. She walked along the path until she saw Adrian near the fountain. He was dressed simply, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, his cane resting against the stone ledge, though he no longer needed it. His eyes were uncovered, clear and steady in the morning light. "You are awake early," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "I could not sleep. I have grown used to the silence, and now it feels different, almost peaceful." "It is," she agreed. "For once, the house is quiet in a good way." "Oh?" Adrian looked toward the horizon where the city skyline shimmered faintly in the distance. "Today feels like the first day of something new," he said. "Then start it right," Elena said. "What will you do first?" He turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "I will reopen the foundation office downtown. I want it to be more than a name on paper. I want it to be a place where people can find light again." "That sounds like something worth fighting for," she said with a smile. "It is," he replied, "and this time, I am not fighting alone." They stood there for a while, letting the quiet fill the space between them. Then Mrs. Green appeared in the distance, her apron dusted with flour. "Breakfast is ready, Mr. Hale," she called out. Adrian nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you, Mrs. Green." When they entered the dining room, the atmosphere was lighter than it had ever been. The morning sunlight painted gold streaks across the long oak table. Mrs. Green poured tea and smiled gently at Elena. "It is good to see the house bright again," she said. Elena returned the smile. "It feels brighter because it finally has a future." After breakfast, Adrian gathered several folders and asked Elena to join him on a short trip into the city. The drive was quiet, the road lined with early autumn trees, whose leaves shimmered in red and gold. For the first time, Adrian drove himself, his hands steady on the wheel, his gaze clear. At the foundation office, they met with a small team of staff who had stayed loyal through the chaos. Adrian spoke to them with a calm conviction that came not from authority, but from purpose. "The Hale Foundation will no longer exist to protect our name," he said. "It will exist to protect people. We will focus on recovery programs, training for the visually impaired, and scholarships for young researchers working on vision restoration." The staff nodded, inspired by his clarity. Elena stood near the doorway, watching him. The man who once hid from the world now stood in front of it, steady and unafraid. After the meeting, they walked along the street outside the office. The city was busy, cars passing, vendors setting up stalls, children laughing as they ran past. Adrian paused at a small flower stand and picked up a single white lily. "For you," he said. Elena accepted it, smiling softly. "What is this for?" "For reminding me that light still exists," he said. Her smile widened. "You found that light yourself, Adrian." He shook his head gently. "No, I only saw it when you walked into my darkness." They continued walking until the afternoon sun began to dip behind the buildings. As they returned to the car, Elena glanced at him. "Do you ever think about leaving it all behind? The company, the estate? Everything that reminds you of the past?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember that running from shadows only makes them longer. I want to build something honest here, in the same place where the lies began." "That sounds like redemption," she said. "Maybe it is," he replied. "Or maybe it is just finally living." When they arrived back at the estate, the sky had turned a deep gold. The air smelled of rain, though no storm had come. Adrian walked to the piano room and sat before the instrument. Elena followed quietly. He played a few slow notes, his fingers moving with confidence. The melody was no longer haunting. It was gentle and alive. "What song is that?" she asked. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Something I wrote for you," he said. "It is called The Light Between." Elena's voice softened. "It is beautiful." "It is unfinished," he said. "Like us." She smiled, stepping closer. "Then, keep playing until it is complete." The sound of the piano filled the room, drifting through the open windows and out into the evening air. For the first time since the day they met, there were no lies, no contracts, no hidden truths between them. Only two people who had found each other through the wreckage of their pasts. When the last note faded, Adrian closed his eyes. "For so long, I thought sight was the only way to see. But you taught me something different." Elena looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "What did I teach you?" "That sometimes the heart sees before the eyes ever can," he said. The room fell silent except for the steady rhythm of the rain beginning outside. The world beyond the walls was still uncertain. But for that moment, inside the Hale estate, everything felt exactly as it should be. And in that silence, where pain had once lived, love began to take its place quietly, truthfully, and without need for disguise. The following week unfolded in gentle rhythm, a rare calm after months of storms. The Hale estate had changed. The once cold marble halls now carried warmth, laughter, and the faint music of piano keys that drifted through the rooms every evening. The staff moved without fear, and Mrs. Green often hummed softly while arranging flowers in the foyer. The air smelled of new beginnings. Elena spent most mornings in the conservatory, helping Adrian draft plans for the Hale Foundation's first outreach program. The table was covered in papers, sketches, and handwritten notes. Every page spoke of rebuilding training centers, medical grants, and scholarships for those who had lost vision or direction in life. "You know," Elena said one morning, glancing at the list of proposed projects, "this looks less like a business plan and more like a promise." Adrian smiled faintly. "That is what it is meant to be. I built too many things before, out of pride. This one has to come from purpose." She nodded. "Then you are already halfway there." He looked at her with quiet warmth. "And the other half?" She smiled. "That is faith." He reached across the table and gently brushed his hand against hers. "Then maybe, for once, I can have both." Their work continued for hours, sunlight moving slowly across the glass ceiling above them. When the afternoon grew late, Adrian stood and stretched. "We should take a walk," he said. "It feels wrong to plan a better world from behind a desk." They walked through the gardens, where the autumn breeze carried the soft scent of roses. The fountain shimmered under the fading light. And somewhere in the distance, birds called from the trees. "Do you ever miss the city?" Elena asked as they followed the cobblestone path. "Sometimes," he said. "The noise, the motion, the illusion that you are always moving forward. But here, I finally learned that stillness is not the same as being stuck." She smiled. "You sound like someone who has found peace." "Maybe I have," he said quietly. "Or maybe I am just learning what peace looks like." They stopped near the edge of the garden where the land sloped toward the hills. The sun had dipped low, painting the horizon in soft gold. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian said, "There is something I have been meaning to tell you." Elena turned to him, curious. "What is it?" He took a slow breath. "When I offered you the contract, I did it out of desperation. I needed someone who could make the world see me as stable again, someone who could quiet the noise around my name. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as part of an arrangement. I started seeing you as—" He paused, his voice low but steady. "As the only thing that ever felt real." Elena felt her heart tighten. The wind rustled the leaves around them, carrying his words into the air like something fragile. "Adrian," she said softly, "you do not owe me an explanation." "I do," he said firmly, "because I do not want what we have to carry the weight of what it used to be. You deserve more than a contract. You deserve a choice." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes warm but resolute. "And what if my choice is to stay?" He exhaled, the tension in his shoulders melting into something gentler. "Then I would be the luckiest man alive." They stood there in the golden light, the wind tugging softly at her hair. The air between them felt still, yet alive with meaning. Later that evening, they returned to the house. The piano waited in the corner of the conservatory, and Adrian sat before it, playing softly as the first drops of rain began to fall outside. Elena listened, standing near the window. The melody was the same one he had written before, The Light Between, but now it carried warmth instead of sorrow. When he finished, he turned to her. "You once told me music should tell the truth," he said. She nodded. "It still should." "Then I need to tell one more truth," he said. "The contract between us, it ends next week. But I do not want that to mean goodbye. I want us to decide what comes after, together." Elena's eyes softened. "You mean start again, but without lies?" "Exactly," he said. "No conditions, no pretending. Just us." "Loy." She walked toward him slowly, her footsteps quiet against the floor. "Then here is my truth," she said. "I stopped being here for the contract a long time ago. I stayed because I wanted to." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming gently against the glass roof. Adrian rose from the piano and took her hands in his. "You have changed everything I thought I knew about love," he said quietly. "It is not about control. It is not about status. It is about showing up when it matters most." "And you did," she said, "even when you thought you could not." They stood together in the soft light, the sound of rain surrounding them like a heartbeat. The walls that had once witnessed silence and grief now held something entirely new, hope, fragile but alive. Mrs. Green passed by the door and paused for a moment, smiling quietly before walking away. For years, she had seen the house filled with power, fear, and loss. But tonight, for the first time, she saw something different, a beginning that did not come from wealth or reputation, but from kindness and truth. As the night deepened, the storm outside faded to a whisper. The lights in the conservatory dimmed, leaving only the soft glow of the candles. Elena rested her head against Adrian's shoulder, and he closed his eyes. The house, the company, the noise of the world, all of it faded into the background. What remained was simple, steady, and real. And for the first time in years, Adrian Hale no longer felt like a man pretending to live. He simply was. The next morning began with a sky so clear it almost looked unreal. Sunlight spilled across the gardens, touching the windows of the Hale estate with a soft gold glow. Inside, the house was alive again, quiet, but no longer lonely. The scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the kitchen, and somewhere in the distance, Mrs. Green's humming floated through the hallways like a gentle song of peace. Elena woke to find the curtains already drawn open. On the bedside table sat a single folded note and a white lily, the same kind Adrian had given her at the flower stand in the city. Her heart warmed as she opened the note. "Meet me by the lake after breakfast. There is something I need to show you. A.H." She smiled softly. It was rare for him to use initials. It felt more like a signature of something personal rather than businesslike. After breakfast, she made her way down the garden path. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The lake lay just beyond the far hedges, hidden behind the line of oak trees. When she reached it, Adrian was already there, standing by the wooden dock that stretched out over the calm water. He turned as she approached. "I was beginning to think you would not come," he said lightly. "I had to finish my tea," she teased. "It would have been a crime to waste Mrs. Green's cinnamon blend." He smiled, that quiet, unguarded smile that had become rare and precious. "Then I suppose I will forgive you." She joined him on the dock. The water was still, reflecting the sky like glass. Adrian gestured toward a small wooden boat tied nearby. "I used to come here when I needed to think," he said. "It was the only place where the noise could not reach me, but I never shared it with anyone." "Not even your brother?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Especially not him. This was my hiding place." "Then why show it to me?" He looked out at the water, his expression calm. "Because hiding never helped me heal. I spent too many years building walls. You made me realize life does not wait for us to feel ready." For a moment, Elena said nothing. The sunlight danced across the lake, glinting off the ripples. She could feel the weight of his words settle between them, not heavy, but meaningful. "Do you still plan to step down completely from the company?" she asked finally. "Yes," he said. "Nathan will handle the transition. I want the foundation to be my focus. Something honest, something that matters." She nodded. "I think your brother would be proud." Adrian's gaze softened. I hope so. Low. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to her. Before we leave this chapter behind, I want you to read this. Elena opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, their original marriage contract. The document that had once defined everything between them. Across the bottom, where her signature had once rested beside his, was now a single handwritten note in his steady script. This contract is void. What remains between us is not business, it is choice. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked up at him, speechless. He said quietly, "You once told me that truth is simple, but hard to live with. I am choosing to live with it now. I love you, Elena. No contracts, no conditions, no masks." The world seemed to pause around them, the breeze, the water, the sound of distant birds, all fading until there was only his voice. Elena stepped closer. "You are sure?" she asked softly. He nodded. "For the first time in my life." Tears filled her eyes, but they were not from sadness. "Then I choose the same," she said. "Not because you saved me, but because we saved each other." He smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes completely. "Then that makes it real." They stood together on the dock, the morning sunlight wrapping around them like a promise. Adrian reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining, not as part of an agreement, but as something freely given. After a while, they sat by the edge of the dock, watching the water ripple softly. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think," she said quietly, "that everything that happened, every mistake, every lie, was meant to lead us here?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it just means we were strong enough to survive it." She smiled. "That sounds like something you would tell one of your students one day." He chuckled. "If I ever become wise enough to teach, I will make sure to give you credit." The sound of laughter carried across the lake, light and unburdened. The air was still cool, but the warmth between them made it feel like spring again. When they finally stood to leave, Adrian took one last look at the water. "This place was my silence," he said. "Now it can be our peace." Elena squeezed his hand. "Then let us build from that peace." "Oh." They walked back toward the house, the path lined with light breaking through the trees. Mrs. Green was waiting for them near the porch, her kind eyes shining with quiet pride. "Welcome home," she said simply. And for once, the word home did not sound like a place built from walls or wealth. It sounded like belonging. That evening, as the sun set over the Hale estate, Adrian sat at the piano again. Elena joined him, placing her hand gently on the keys beside his. Together, they played the opening notes of "The Light Between." The melody, once written out of pain, now carried only hope. Outside, the first stars began to appear above the lake, their reflections shimmering on the surface below. For the first time in years, there was no pretense, no fear, no debt owed to the past. There was only truth and the quiet, steady rhythm of two hearts learning, at last, how to move forward as one. The next few days passed with a quiet rhythm that felt both new and familiar. For the first time in years, Adrian Hale no longer woke with dread. The nightmares had begun to fade, replaced by something gentler, a sense of peace he still did not fully understand. The mansion that once echoed with loneliness now hummed with soft activity. Mrs. Green filled the hallways with the smell of baking bread, and sunlight seemed to linger longer in every room. Elena had started to make small changes around the estate. The heavy curtains that used to block the light were replaced with gauze drapes that let the morning sun spill through. Fresh flowers appeared in every hallway, and the once cold dining room table now carried bowls of fruit instead of untouched silver. It was not luxury that transformed the house, it was warmth. One afternoon, as she arranged wildflowers in a glass vase, she heard the sound of the piano from the conservatory. The notes were soft, hesitant, almost like a conversation between old memories and new beginnings. She followed the sound and found Adrian seated at the piano, his head tilted slightly as he listened to the melody unfolding beneath his fingers. "You are getting better," she said gently. He smiled without turning. "I have a good teacher." She laughed softly. "I only remind you to keep feeling what you play." "That is harder than it sounds," he said. "Feeling means remembering." And she walked closer and rested her hand lightly on the piano. "Then maybe remembering is not always the enemy." He paused, then looked up at her. His eyes, once shadowed, were clear now open, unguarded. "You are right," he said quietly. "Maybe it is time I remember differently." They spent the rest of the afternoon together at the piano. Elena played a few bars. Adrian followed, their melody weaving between moments of silence. Each note seemed to lift something invisible from the air. When evening came, they moved to the terrace overlooking the gardens. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. Adrian handed her a cup of tea, the steam curling softly between them. "Do you know what day it is?" he asked. She frowned, thinking. "Wednesday?" He chuckled. "It is also the anniversary of the day we signed the contract." Elena smiled faintly. "You remember that?" "I remember everything," he said. "The trembling in your hands when you signed. The way you tried to look strong even when you were terrified. I thought you were just desperate then." "And now?" she asked. "Now I know you were brave," he said. "Braver than I was." She looked out over the garden, her voice soft. "That day feels like a lifetime ago." "It was," he said. "And yet, it brought us here." For a moment, neither spoke. The air was still, filled only with the distant hum of crickets and the faint ripple of the fountain below. Then Adrian said, "I've been thinking about what comes next, about what it means to start over." She turned to him, curious. "And what does it mean?" "It means leaving behind the things that no longer belong to us," he said. "The contracts, the debts, the names built from someone else's mistakes. I want to give this house back to the foundation. Let it become something good again." Elena looked at him with surprise. "You would give it away?" He nodded slowly. "The estate has always felt like a monument to guilt. But if it becomes a center for rehabilitation, a place where others can heal, it might finally mean something." She smiled. "Then it will carry your name for the right reasons." He looked at her, his expression soft. "And ours, maybe?" The way he said it made her heart swell. There was no grandeur in his tone, only sincerity, the quiet truth of a man who had learned that love was not about possession, but about choice. Later that night, they sat together in the study, reviewing blueprints for the new foundation center. The design included housing for patients, classrooms for training, and a wing for medical research. At the bottom of the page, Elena noticed a small handwritten note. "Dedicated to Thomas Hale, and to everyone who learns to see again." She touched the words lightly. "Your brother would have loved this." Adrian nodded. "Maybe this is how I make peace with him. By doing what we both should have done, turning pain into purpose." As they talked, the clock in the corner struck 9. Rain began to fall outside, light at first, then steadier, pattering against the glass windows. Elena leaned back in her chair, her eyes half closed. "You know," she said, "the sound of rain used to frighten me. It always reminded me of endings." "And now?" Adrian asked. "Now it sounds like renewal," she said. He smiled. "That is what this is, Elena. Renewal." "Oh." For a while, they listened in silence, the steady rhythm of the rain mingling with the soft crackle of the fireplace. The house no longer felt haunted by its past. It breathed with them now, alive, human, real. Before they went upstairs, Adrian stopped her at the bottom of the staircase. "Elena," he said, his voice low but certain, "there is one more thing I have to ask you." She turned to him, her expression curious and warm. "What is it?" He hesitated, as if measuring his words carefully. "When the foundation opens, I do not want to stand there as Adrian Hale, the man who built it. I want to stand there with you, as the man who found it worth building because of you. Would you be willing to do that with me?" Elena looked at him for a long moment, her eyes shining. "You mean as your partner?" He smiled softly. "In every sense of the word." The pause that followed was filled with meaning deeper than words. Finally, she said, "Yes, Adrian. In every sense." "Oh." And in that moment, surrounded by rain and the echo of the house's quiet heart, two people who had once met through lies found something far stronger than truth. They found belonging. Outside, the storm began to fade, leaving the world washed clean. Inside, the light from the fire glowed softly across their faces, and for the first time, it felt like both of them were finally home. The following weeks unfolded with purpose and quiet determination. The Hale estate, once a fortress of secrets, had transformed into the beating heart of something new, the Hale Rehabilitation and Vision Center. What used to be cold marble halls were now filled with people, architects, volunteers, and workers moving with energy and hope. The sound of construction mixed with laughter, and sunlight filled the rooms that had long been hidden under dust and silence. Adrian walked through the main hall each morning, clipboard in hand, sleeves rolled up, speaking with the same precision he once used in board meetings. But now, his tone carried warmth instead of command. Elena followed beside him, noting details he missed, adding gentle touches to the plans that turned blueprints into living spaces. "This room will be the patient library," she said one morning, pointing to a large open space near the eastern corridor. "I want it to feel calm, not clinical. Maybe soft lighting, plants, and a reading corner." Adrian nodded, smiling. "And music," he added. "Every room deserves a little music." She smiled back. "Then we will put a piano here too. Just do not tell the budget committee." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You are the committee now." It was true. After the board officially approved Adrian's resignation, he transferred the estate to the Hale Foundation. But instead of leaving entirely, he insisted that Elena be appointed as co-director. "If this place is to mean anything," he had told the board, "it should be built by two people who understand what it means to lose everything and rebuild it anyway." By the second week, the transformation was visible. The staff had replaced the dark wallpaper with soft cream tones. The heavy drapes were gone, replaced by light curtains that let the morning air move freely. Outside, gardeners restored the courtyard fountain, and the sound of running water returned to the estate for the first time in years. One afternoon, as Adrian and Elena reviewed the progress from the balcony, she turned to him and said quietly, "Do you ever think your father would approve of this?" Adrian leaned against the railing, his gaze thoughtful. "He would not understand it," he said. "He built everything from fear of failure, of weakness, of losing control. I spent most of my life trying to be like him. Now I am trying to undo what that made me." Elena reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "You already have." He looked at her, the tension in his features easing. "Maybe," he said, "but it feels strange to finally live without the weight of his voice in my head." "That is what healing sounds like," she said softly. The following morning, the local newspaper published a feature about the new Hale Center. The headline read, "From Scandal to Salvation, the Hales Rebuild with Purpose." The story highlighted not just the rehabilitation programs, but also Adrian's public statement. He had said simply, "I once thought blindness was the end of seeing. Now I know it is possible to see more clearly through the people who help you find the light again." The article quickly went viral. Donations poured in from across the state, and messages of support arrived daily. But for Adrian, none of it mattered more than seeing the first group of patients step into the estate turned center 2 weeks later. The first to arrive was a young man named Oliver, who had lost his sight in an accident 3 years earlier. Adrian personally greeted him at the front steps. "You are safe here," he said, "and you will leave stronger than when you arrived." Oliver smiled faintly. "You really used to live here?" "I did," Adrian said. "But I was blind in more ways than one." "Hello." The young man laughed quietly. "Then maybe this place can help both of us see better." Elena watched from a few steps away, her heart swelling with quiet pride. She saw in Adrian's face what she had always hoped to see, the reflection of a man who no longer hid behind guilt, but used it as a bridge toward empathy. That evening, the two of them sat in the courtyard as the last of the workers left. The fountain shimmered under the glow of lanterns, and the night air was cool and gentle. "You did it," Elena said softly. "We did it," Adrian corrected. "I could never have done this without you," she smiled. "You could have, but it would not have looked like this." He turned to her, his expression serious. "I used to think power was what made a person unbreakable, but I was wrong. It is kindness. Kindness holds more weight than any title I ever had." Elena's voice was gentle. "That is because kindness cannot be taken away." "Oh." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the water's rhythm. Then Adrian said, "Tomorrow, when the press comes, I want you to be the one to speak." She looked at him, surprised. "Me?" "Yes," he said. "You are the reason this place has a heart. The world should hear that from you." "I do not like attention," she said. "Neither did I," he replied. "But sometimes light finds us whether we ask for it or not." The next day, as the Hale Center officially opened, cameras and reporters filled the courtyard. Adrian stood quietly beside Elena as she stepped to the podium. She spoke clearly, her voice steady but full of emotion. "This place began as a house built on silence," she said. "But now it is a home built on second chances. We are here not because we were perfect, but because we were willing to change." The applause that followed was soft at first, then steady and heartfelt. Adrian looked at her, pride shining in his eyes. For the first time, he was content to stand behind someone else, letting her light fill the room. When the ceremony ended, he whispered to her, "You spoke the truth." She smiled. It was ours to tell. As evening fell, the courtyard lights glowed softly against the stone walls of the Hale estate. The laughter of patients echoed through the corridors, mingling with the faint sound of music from the conservatory. And for the first time in its long, complicated history, the house stood not as a monument to guilt, but as a living proof that even the broken can rebuild something beautiful, if they choose to begin again. Weeks passed, and the Hale Rehabilitation and Vision Center began to flourish in ways neither Adrian nor Elena could have predicted. The estate, once a symbol of wealth and secrecy, now echoed with the sound of new life footsteps in the corridors, laughter in the gardens, music in the piano room. The transformation was no longer just physical, it was spiritual. Every morning, Adrian greeted the new patients personally. He no longer wore the dark glasses that once hid his eyes. Instead, he looked at each person directly, steady and open, as if to remind them that their brokenness did not define them. Elena noticed the change in him daily, the way his voice carried calm instead of command, the way he listened before he spoke. He had become the kind of man his younger self never believed he could be. On a bright Thursday morning, the center hosted its first public workshop. Guests from local hospitals, community organizations, and universities came to witness the new vision of the Hale Foundation. The ballroom, once used for lavish parties, now served as the main hall. The chandeliers still glittered overhead, but the tables below were covered not with champagne glasses but with medical equipment, models of prosthetic devices, and sketches of rehabilitation programs. Elena moved gracefully through the room, greeting the guests and explaining each initiative. Adrian watched her from across the hall, a quiet pride rising in his chest. She belonged there not as an assistant, not as someone standing in his shadow, but as a leader in her own right. When the time came for the closing speech, Adrian stepped up to the podium. The crowd quieted instantly. His voice carried the same deep timbre that had once commanded boardrooms, but now it held warmth instead of distance. "Years ago," he began, "this house was built to show power. My family believed that status could protect us from loss. But what I have learned is that power built on fear collapses. It is kindness that endures." He paused, letting the silence settle. "Today, this estate no longer belongs to the Hale name alone. It belongs to every person who walks through these doors seeking light after darkness. If my brother were alive, I think he would tell me this is what our family was meant to create all along, not wealth, but purpose." Applause filled the hall. As he stepped down, Elena met him with a quiet smile. "He would be proud," she said softly. "I hope so," he replied. "Because for the first time, I am." Oh. After the event, as the guests left and the sun dipped low behind the hills, Adrian and Elena walked together through the courtyard. The air was cool, the sky painted in shades of lavender and rose. The fountain sparkled in the fading light, and for a moment, it almost felt as if the house itself was breathing in gratitude. Elena turned to him. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" He nodded slowly. "Every day. But for once, the thought does not scare me." "One. And what do you see?" she asked. He smiled. "I see people walking again, reading again, living again. I see this place outgrowing me." She looked at him, curious. "Outgrowing you?" "Yes," he said. "Because that is the point. If something I build needs me forever, then I have failed. True creation should stand on its own." Elena considered his words, then said gently, "Then it will, because it was built with honesty." They continued walking until they reached the garden. The roses were in full bloom again, bright against the deep green leaves. Adrian paused beside them, brushing a single petal with his hand. "These used to be my mother's favorite," he said. "She said a rose was proof that beauty and pain could grow from the same root." Elena smiled softly. She was right. They sat together on the stone bench by the fountain. The sound of the water was steady, almost rhythmic. "You know," Adrian said quietly, For years I thought love was something you had to earn, that you had to prove your worth for it. But now I see it differently. How do you see it now? She asked. As a gift, he said. One you protect by giving, not by holding. Elena's voice trembled slightly. And what if that gift is taken away? He looked at her with steady eyes. Then you give it again. Because love does not disappear. When it leaves, it grows in the people it touches. Oh, for a long while, neither spoke. The night settled gently around them, and the first stars appeared overhead. The quiet between them was not emptiness but peace. The kind that only comes when two lives finally align after chaos. Later that night, Adrian found himself at the piano again. The room was dark, except for the faint glow of the lamp. He played the melody of "The Light Between," the song that had followed them through every stage of their story. As he played, Elena entered the room, carrying 2 cups of tea. "Still working?" she asked softly. "Not working," he said, remembering. She set the cups down and joined him on the bench. "Then let me remember with you." Together they played, their hands moving in quiet harmony. The song no longer sounded like sorrow. It sounded like forgiveness. When the last note faded, Adrian said, "Tomorrow, the new patients arrive. Some of them are children. I want to make sure they feel safe here." They will," Elena said. "Because you built this place with empathy, not pity." He turned to her, gratitude soft in his eyes. "You taught me that difference." The rain began to fall outside, soft and steady, tapping against the glass roof. The sound no longer reminded either of them of endings. It reminded them of beginnings of everything they had rebuilt, piece by piece, until even the broken parts became beautiful. And as the night deepened, the Hale estate stood silent once more. But it was no longer a house haunted by its past. It was a sanctuary of second chances, and its walls carried the living proof that healing was not the absence of pain, it was the courage to grow through it, together. Spring arrived quietly at the Hale estate, carrying with it a warmth that seemed to touch everything it passed. The air was filled with the scent of blooming roses, and the once solemn corridors now hummed with life. The Hale Rehabilitation and Vision Center had been open for 3 months, and it was already changing lives. The grand house that had once held secrets now held stories of recovery, resilience, and rediscovery. Each morning began the same way. Adrian walked through the main hall, greeting patients and staff alike, his steps calm and steady. He no longer carried a cane, though he kept it near his office as a reminder of the journey that had brought him there. Elena often joined him, notebook in hand, discussing schedules, funding, and new partnerships. Yet every so often, their conversations drifted from plans to laughter, from work to warmth. One morning, a group of young patients gathered in the courtyard for music therapy. A small boy named Samuel, no older than 10, was learning to play the piano. His fingers trembled as he pressed the keys, the melody uncertain but full of effort. Adrian stood beside him, patient and encouraging. "You do not have to rush," Adrian said gently. "Let the notes find you. Do you hear how they rise and fall? That is where the heart of the music lives." The boy nodded, tried again, and this time, the melody flowed smoother. When he finished, Elena applauded softly from across the courtyard. Samuel grinned shyly and said, "Did I do it right?" Adrian knelt beside him, smiling. "You did it bravely, and that matters more than perfect." The boy's face lit up, and Elena felt her heart swell. Watching Adrian with the children reminded her of how far he had come. The man who once believed himself broken now stood as proof that healing was possible, even for those who had lost everything. That afternoon, Elena and Adrian met with reporters for a final interview before the official expansion announcement. The foundation had received new funding from the city, allowing them to open a second branch downtown. When the journalist asked what inspired the project, Adrian paused before answering. "I built this place to atone," he said. "But what I found instead was grace. My wife reminded me that redemption is not earned through guilt, but through action. Every person who walks through these doors teaches me that sight has less to do with eyes and more to do with courage." The room fell silent for a moment, and then applause filled the space. Elena, standing at his side, reached for his hand under the table, her eyes glistening. After the reporters left, they walked through the gardens together. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, scattering light over the path. The fountain sparkled in the distance, its sound blending with the soft hum of the wind. It feels different now, Helena said quietly. Adrian looked around. It does. When I first came back to this house, all I could see were ghosts. Now, I see beginnings. Oh, she smiled. That is because you created them. He turned to her, his expression warm. No, Elena, we did. They continued walking until they reached the lake, the same one where he had torn up their old contract months ago. The surface was calm, reflecting the pink and gold sky. Adrian stopped at the edge, his voice thoughtful. This lake used to be my hiding place, he said. Now it feels like a mirror. When I look at it, I do not see the man I was. I see the man you helped me become. Oh, Elena's voice softened. You became him yourself. I only reminded you that he was still there. He smiled. Then you reminded me of everything worth seeing. They stood side by side in silence, listening to the gentle rhythm of the water. For once, neither of them needed words. The peace between them spoke louder than any promise. That evening, the staff and patients gathered in the courtyard for a small celebration. Lanterns hung from the trees, their soft glow illuminating smiling faces. Mrs. Green prepared her famous apple tarts, and the scent drifted through the night air. Laughter echoed against the stone walls that had once held nothing but grief. When the music began, Adrian took Elena's hand. "May I have this dance?" he asked. She laughed softly. "There is no orchestra." He gestured toward the young patient sitting near the fountain. "There is music enough for us." "Oh?" They began to dance under the lantern light, moving slowly to the sound of distant piano keys played by Samuel. The world around them seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet joy of the moment, the feel of his hand in hers, the warmth of the night air, the rhythm of two hearts that had found their way to the same beat. As the song ended, Adrian leaned close and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." Elena smiled. "You were never the one who needed saving. You just needed to remember who you were." The celebration continued late into the evening. The fountain shimmered, the lights flickered gently, and the sound of laughter carried through the gardens. The Hale estate had finally become what it was always meant to be, not a monument to pride, but a sanctuary of hope. When the last guests left and the house grew quiet again, Adrian and Elena stood together at the front steps. The night sky stretched wide above them, filled with stars. "What do you think comes next?" she asked. He looked out over the grounds that had once been his prison and now were his peace. "Life," he said simply. "The kind that does not need to be perfect, just true." She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "Then let us live it, Adrian Hale." And as they turned back toward the house, the lights inside glowed softly, casting a warm reflection on the stone walls. The Hale estate, once a place of silence and sorrow, stood alive once more, carrying the quiet truth that love, when built on kindness and courage, could heal even the deepest wounds. The storm that began their story had long passed. What remained now was light, and the promise that sometimes, even after the darkest chapters, life can begin again.